Our second reading today is from the Gospel according to John, chapter 21, verses 1 to 19. Later, Jesus appeared again to the disciples beside the Sea of Galilee. This is how it happened. Several of the disciples were there: Simon Peter, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two other disciples. Simon Peter said, "I'm going fishing." "We'll come too," they all said. So they went out in the boat, but they caught nothing all night. At dawn, the disciples saw Jesus standing on the beach, but they couldn't see who he was. He called out, "Friends, have you caught any fish?" "No," they replied. Then he said, "Throw out your net on the right-hand side of the boat, and you'll get plenty of fish." So they did, and they couldn't draw in the net because there were so many fish in it. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, for he had stripped for work, jumped into the water, and swam ashore. The others stayed with the boat and pulled the loaded net to the shore, for they were only out about 300 feet. When they got there, they saw that a charcoal fire was burning and fish were frying over it, and there was bread. "Bring some of the fish you've just caught," Jesus said. So Simon Peter went aboard and dragged the net to the shore. There were 153 large fish, and yet the net had not torn. "Now come and have some breakfast," said Jesus. And no one dared ask him if he really was the Lord, because they were sure of it. Then Jesus served them the bread and the fish. This was the third time Jesus had appeared to his disciples since he had been raised from the dead. After breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," Peter replied. "You know I love you." "Then feed my lambs." Jesus repeated the question, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord," Peter said. "You know I love you." "Then take care of my sheep," Jesus said. Once more he asked him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved that Jesus asked this question a third time. He said, "Lord, you know everything. You know I love you." Jesus said, "Then feed my sheep. The truth is, when you were young, you were able to do as you liked and go wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and others will direct you and take you where you don't want to go." Jesus said this to let him know what kind of death he would die to glorify God. Then Jesus told him, "Follow me." And may God speak to us through these verses today. I've mentioned several times at Bible study or in different conversations with people that one of my favorite movies is Fiddler on the Roof, even though it is a musical. I'm not a big fan most of the time. But this story, Fiddler on the Roof, it's the musical story, the ups and downs of a family of Russian Jews. The main character is a poor milkman named Tevye, who is married to a hardworking wife named Goda. And they live in a poor village, and they're trying to marry off their 5 daughters. Now, Tevye and Goda have been married a long time, and there's a scene where they're talking, and they start sort of bickering a little bit, and because this is a musical, it soon turns into a song. In the middle of this arguing, Tevye suddenly looks at Goda and asks her, "Do you love me?" Well, Goda looks at him as if to say, "What kind of question is that? Tevye, I cook good meals for you every day. I wash your filthy clothes. I keep your house clean for you. I take good care of you." And Tevye says, "But do you love me?" Goda says, "I've helped you raise 5 daughters. I've struggled to make ends meet with you. I work hard for you." Now Tevye starts to look a little sad. He's waiting to hear her say it. And he asks her again, "But do you love me?" Goda says, "We have shared our lives together day after day, all these years, sleeping in the same bed, waking up together every morning." And by now, Tevye's face shows that he really wants to know the answer to this question. He needs to hear those words. And so he asks her again, "But do you love me?" And by this time, Goda has begun to wonder herself how she really feels about him. Each time that he asks her, she gets a little more uncomfortable until finally she turns away and asks herself, Do I love him? And there's this pained and worried expression on her face as if she is not sure of the answer. So she thinks about it. She examines her heart. And finally, we see her face brighten. She knows the answer, and she turns back to Tevye and she sings, "Yes, I love you." And they hug and kiss, and you know that their relationship has grown. They've gone to a deeper level. Now, when you watch a scene like that, we may find ourselves asking the same questions about people we love. Do they really love me? Do I honestly love them? In one form or another, we have probably all at some point lived through a similar scene like that. Moments when we are waiting to hear from someone those words, "I love you." We may have heard them a million times. We might have gotten one of the casual, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I love you. What's for dinner?" "Sure, I love you. Where's the TV remote?" But sometimes we reach a point where we really need to hear that with depth, with sincerity. We want our feelings to be returned. John's gospel tells us that Jesus appeared after his resurrection to 7 of his disciples at dawn on a seashore. And after helping them land a huge catch of fish, Jesus cooks breakfast for them. Imagine that. That'd be pretty nice, wouldn't it? And after their bellies are full, Jesus takes Peter aside and asks him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And Peter answers, "Well, yes, Lord, you know I love you." And Jesus says, "Feed my sheep." A few minutes later, Jesus asks him again, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Of course, Lord, you know I love you." "Then take care of my sheep." And a few minutes later, he asks him one more time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And we're told Peter's feelings are hurt because Jesus doesn't seem to believe him. And so Peter says a third time, "Lord, you know everything. You know I love you." And Jesus says, "Then feed my sheep." Now, this passage has been interpreted in various ways. Some believe it was written to convince readers that Jesus made Peter the leader of the disciples and gave him more authority than the others. There were power struggles in the early church, and people were following different leaders, as we talked about in Bible study recently. So some have said maybe this is a passage of a part of a campaign for the Peter group. Now, others have suggested that Jesus made Peter confess his love 3 times as a way of forgiving him for the 3 times Peter denied him when Jesus was arrested. So maybe the passage is about forgiveness and restoration. Now, experts also like to point out that when Jesus asks the question, the Greek word for love that John uses is an expression for the highest and most perfect kind of love. But when Peter answers John, the word that is used there means something more like friendship. "Do you love me, Peter?" "Well, I really like you, Lord. You're like my best friend." Now, there's some truth to all of these interpretations, but it is also possible that what we have here is Jesus and Peter acting out the roles of Tevye and Goda. Each time that Jesus asks Peter if he loves him, he may be trying to force Peter to seriously consider what it means to love Jesus, to dig down deep inside himself and examine his own heart and decide if it's really true. "Do you love me, Peter?" "Sure, Lord, I love you." "Peter, do you love me?" Yeah, come on, Lord, you know I love you." "Peter, what? Do you love me?" More than any other disciple, Peter is used in the Gospels as a symbol of the church, of us. A church that is sometimes brave and sometimes cowardly, sometimes strong and sometimes smart, sometimes weak and bumbling. He is a symbol of us all. And so this passage, in a way, asks all of us to examine our own hearts and gauge the depth of our own love for Jesus. As one writer says, Jesus asks again, and you realize he is looking into your soul. and you begin to see the point. It is not a matter of your beliefs or doctrines. It is not about that Christian churchy part of life. Jesus did not ask Peter whether he was willing to devote some time or money to him or his kingdom. But instead, this is a matter of the heart. It is a matter of who you are and to whom your heart belongs. It is a matter of what is most important to you. More than anything else, it is the depth of our love for Jesus that determines the passion with which we will serve him. Now, as he almost always does, Jesus summons each of us to enter into more meaningful and committed relationship with him, a relationship that begins and ends in love. But then, that loving relationship is meant to be expressed in service. If we love Jesus, then we too must tend to the sheep. In some ways, this passage should give us almost a kind of sense of deja vu, because it's more or less a reworking of the time when Jesus first called Peter and the other disciples. You might remember on that first occasion, they had been fishing all night with nothing to show for it, yet again. Jesus told them to cast their nets out into deeper water. They land a huge catch of fish, and they were amazed. And Jesus said, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of people." Well, here they are again, only this time it's after the resurrection. But it's been pointed out, it seems the only thing after the resurrection the disciples can think to do after an incredible event like that is just to go back to fishing. They go back to their regular routines, to their ordinary habits. Things don't really seem very different for them. Almost as if the resurrection didn't make that big a difference. We are told this is the third time Jesus appeared to them after the resurrection. What have they been doing? Why don't their lives seem changed? Maybe the excitement, maybe the passion that they felt, maybe that's worn off a little bit. They're even still fishing in the wrong places, apparently. But when Jesus shows up, he doesn't yell at them. "Hey, didn't I send you out on a mission for me? Fishers of people, remember? Maybe I picked the wrong bunch of disciples." No, what does he do? He fixes them breakfast and gives them another fishing lesson. And he gently, patiently reminds them why he called them in the first place. To follow him and serve him. Now, for us here today, Easter, with its promises of forgiveness and new life, is already 2 weeks in the past. And do we live as if those promises have happened? Do our lives seem changed by the Easter message? Or are we back to the same old routines? Maybe fishing in the wrong places, forgetting to tend the sheep. But just as Jesus kept coming back to the disciples, he keeps coming back to us too, again and again, hoping to find us living as if Easter did really happen and mean something to us, hoping that we love him enough to do what he asks us to do. Not angry, but gentle, patient, reminding us of our first call, reminding us of his love for us, and to invite us once again to follow him. Amen.